Haitian community members are thinking about their future in the United States. There are obviously potentially dozens of things to cover. I'm just going to cover 4 big ones that, in my experience, that a lot of Haitian immigrants rely on, especially after the expiration of TPS. And the first 2 are sort of family-based ones that I think a lot of Haitian folks are disproportionately eligible for, because so many have been in the United States for so long, often since 2010, in the wake of the earthquake or longer. And so it's really important for folks, especially those who have been in the United States for a long time or have formed family connections since moving to the United States, to talk to a lawyer and get a potential screening. Oh, like my status just ran out, but maybe I have another basis for status. So family-based adjustment of status or green card is available to gain a permanent residence if you have a U.S. citizen spouse, parent, children over the age of 21, and potentially for siblings. Green card holders, so not American citizens, but permanent residents, can sponsor spouses and unmarried children only, rather than parents or siblings. So if you've are working with folks who have formed these kinds of family connections while they're living in the United States, make sure that they talk to a lawyer to see if they are eligible to adjust status or apply for a green card. Cancellation of removal is a special defensive measure that folks can take in the worst case scenario where they are arrested by ICE or taken into removal proceedings in immigration court. And because only an immigration judge rather than USCIS can gather, this is not something that they can affirmatively apply for at this point unless they've already been arrested and placed in a removal proceeding, but something to keep in mind because a lot of immigration lawyers actually don't know about this status or haven't used it in a way that makes it top of mind for them. But this is available for individuals who have been continuously present in the United States for more than 10 years. So in this case, people who've been here since at least 2016, and whose deportation would place a US citizen family member in extraordinary hardship or difficulty. So most often you see this in the context of folks who have been here for more than 10 years and who have had children while living in the United States, and they get placed in removal proceeding after an ICE arrest. Those folks can argue, I've been here for more than 10 years, and deporting me would place my US citizen child, who now has birthright citizenship, in an extraordinary difficulty. Hard to argue against, because obviously if your parents are deported, the child would face a lot of hardship. And so this is something to keep in mind, especially for folks who have gotten married or have had kids since moving to the United States more than 10 years ago. There are also statuses that are available for survivors of abuse or crimes. I'm just going to go over 3 of them. One of them is Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, which is available for immigrants under the age of 21 who were neglected, abused, or abandoned by one or more parents. And the one or more parents part is very important because someone who still has a very good relationship, maybe even with the parent with whom they came to the United States, can be eligible for this kind of status. As long as at least one parent neglected, abused, or abandoned them at some point in their life. And it's kind of a complicated status to pursue because you usually need an order from a city or state family court before you can go to USCIS for it. Often it involves like an order of guardianship, which is scarier than it sounds, but it really just requires some adult in their life who can not like fully take place of the parent who neglected, abused, or abandoned them, but just be a mentor figure with like the best interest of a child in mind. And a lot of religious ministers, as well as mentors and elders and faith communities, can often play this role really well. So something to pursue and think about in your congregations if anyone under the age of 21 has been neglected, abused, or abandoned by one or more parent. And if someone is eligible and can get this family court order, it's a really kind of a streamlined and like relatively straightforward path to a green card, even though it can take many, many years for the application to actually get through. U visas are available for victims of major crimes who cooperate with law enforcement. And the idea is that we don't want to disincentivize immigrant or undocumented victims of crime to go to the police to, crack down on someone who really is quite dangerous. So folks who have been cooperating with law enforcement in the investigation of a crime that they've been, and I would say in like 40 to 50% of the case, domestic violence is the most common fact pattern. It's they can often get a visa on the basis of their victimization. VAWA, or Violence Against Women's Act visa, are available for those who have been victimized by United States citizen or legal permanent resident abusers. So parents, children over the age of 21, or spouses. And the idea is that you don't necessarily want to empower a US citizen or a green card holding abuser to hold immigration status over their undocumented or immigrant spouse. And these kind of statuses, I would say, are particularly important for clergy or faith leaders or lay leaders or community leaders like yourselves to be aware of. Because I, as an immigration lawyer or sort of a high volume legal practitioner, often miss this kind of status. I'm often in the middle of an 8-month long process of getting someone's asylum in a very uphill and difficult and time consuming case, when I learn for the first time that someone had an experience of domestic abuse that would have qualified them for a much simpler basis for status. And that's because, I work with a lot of people, and like I don't necessarily get to spend as much time one-on-one with a lot of folks in a way that allows me to earn their trust. And so clergy and faith leaders and neighborhood leaders to whom survivors and victims of abuse confide their stories of abuse are often the only people who have the opportunity to flag that, oh, maybe you might be eligible for an immigration status or a green card on the basis of what you suffered. So it's super helpful for clergy to be able to note that, flag things for obviously the immigrant, maybe make a referral to a lawyer, or even help with the paperwork themselves, because the paperwork for these stuff is much simpler than the status that we'll describe next, which is asylum and Convention Against Torture under the Refugee Convention and the Torture Convention. And these are statuses, often paths to green card, which are available for individuals who have a reasonable fear of persecution or torture in their home country. And in the case of persecution, not just torture, it has to be on the basis of a protected class like politics, religion, or race. And there needs to be a government nexus where the government is unwilling or unable to protect the person or actively complicit in the violence. Usually, you only have 1 year after your arrival in the United States to apply for asylum to be eligible for the whole package of benefits. But in the case of TPS expiration, a different rule applies, which is that you can apply for asylum within a reasonable amount of time after your previous status has expired. Most courts have said this falls somewhere within 3 to 6 months. So in the case of folks whose Haitian TPS is just expiring, basically until the end of October or November, or hopefully before January or February of next year. But people should be really careful before applying for asylum, because a rejected asylum application almost always results in referral to immigration court removal proceedings. And this means that people will be much more likely to be arrested by ICE or to be able to eventually get a final removal order pending against them, in a way that makes it much more difficult for them to adjust status on the basis of, let's say, a family-based green card or another basis for status, or getting a student visa, or any of the other paths to potential status. So people should really confer with a lawyer before deciding to apply for asylum. And I think there is, ultimately a problem that our moral and theological language of asylum and sanctuary and refugee status is pretty far apart from the legal language of asylum, which is highly unjust and restrictive. American asylum law specifically restricts asylum status to people who face purely private violence. And often, in the case of Haitian asylum seekers, people allege gang violence without being able to demonstrate that the government was complicit in the harm that they suffered. Or people will fail to allege a protected class like politics, religion, or race, because, maybe the basis for the persecution or the harm they faced was that they were a small business owner in their home community and made opportune target for gang extortion. And again, American asylum law very unjustly doesn't recognize that. And morally and theologically, that can be hard to stomach, because, hey, someone's about to be potentially killed or tortured in their home country. Of course they deserve asylum. Of course they're a refugee. But it's important to remember that law doesn't think this way, and that it's really important to be able to talk to a lawyer who can vet people's asylum claim before they make the risky decision to apply for asylum. And as I mentioned earlier, a new rule just released will try to short circuit USCIS asylum interviews for many applicants. So it's riskier now than ever to apply for asylum. A lot of people still will have good cases, especially if the kind of harm that they suffered involve senior government officials, or maybe they were directly targeted by the police or in the pockets of the gangs. And, you know, lawyers, immigration lawyers like myself can help assess whether or not it's worth it for someone to apply for asylum, or maybe try to wait things out, stay under the radar for a bit, and to be able to maybe hope for TPS expiration and extension under a different administration, or to be able to form family connections in the United States. It's important to be able to plan for the worst, and you know, what should someone do, or what should clergy or a community leader do when one of their members is taken by ICE? The first thing you should always do is to get their A number and their country of origin, and most of this, you know, let's assume they're from Haiti, and their A number is probably going to show up in literally every government form that they ever received from ICE or USCIS, including in their TPS paperwork. And this is really important because you can plug in this number to the ICE detainee locator, as well as the immigration court website, and it will show where people are. So if you type in their information, a number and country of origin, to the ICE detainee locator website, it will show at which facility they're being held in, which is really important for knowing whether someone is going to need what kind of legal help and what kind of lawyer you have to contact, because ideally you should obviously contact the lawyer at the place in which they're being detained. And because ICE is constantly transferring people, let's say from New York to New Jersey to Louisiana, then, you know, back to people's home countries, it's really important to know at any given time where someone is being held. Same thing with people's immigration court cases, to know if someone has applied for asylum, if they are appealing their case, or if they have a final removal order entered against them, so that you can communicate this information to legal advocates in a way that hopefully gets the point across and identifies what kind of help people really need. And once you've looked up the detention center at which they're being held, you can look at the ICE facilities directory, as well as a specific website for that detention center, to determine visitation and access rules for, let's say, clergy or lawyers who want to visit, or documented family members who might want to visit. And it's really, I would say, a really important thing for folks like clergy to be able to visit people on immigration detention, because a lot of detainees are going to only have family members who are themselves abroad or are undocumented. So these kinds of pastoral visits are often the only source of friendly contact that people have with the outside world, and are really often an important source of information about paths to seeking release. And the two big things that folks who are in immigration detention should consider is to apply for bond, which might be available for individuals who can submit evidence that they don't pose a flight risk or any danger to the community. So if they don't have criminal record and have long-standing relationship with the community, that makes it unlikely that they'll simply run away. They can ask the immigration court, and the application can be filed by immigration lawyers or by the immigrant themselves. And assuming that someone doesn't pose a flight risk or doesn't pose a danger to the community, and depending on the jurisdiction of the federal court that folks are in, things are much more unfavorable in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi than it is in, for instance, in New York or even in Florida. A bond amount might be set, and typically we see a number between $5,000 and $25,000. Increasingly important is something called the writ of habeas corpus, which is a legal instrument for arguing that someone's detention is illegal. And this happens most often these days when someone has been racially profiled as part of their arrest. And this is much less useful when someone has a final removal order pending against them, or if someone was taken in after a criminal arrest. But if someone was taken in in a raid or in a traffic stop, and really what ICE was doing was racially profiling someone on the basis of their language or the color of their skin, you can often file a writ of habeas corpus to get them released. And the important thing is to note that the writ of habeas corpus is something that is not filed in immigration court, but in a federal court. And most immigration lawyers actually don't know how to do this. And so if someone is swept up in a raid, don't just go to an immigration lawyer. Consider exploring a writ of habeas corpus. Push the immigration lawyer to like file it or make a referral or maybe even directly retain a federal immigration practitioner. Typically going to cost around $5,000. Uh, Frustratingly, sometimes even if someone was illegally arrested, often the federal court will say host a bond hearing in terms of in terms of the relief that is granted or the order that is issued, rather than ordering immediate release. And so in that case, it might cost another $5,000 to $28,000 extra for the bond hearing. It's a lot of money, obviously, and to the extent that you as a community are engaged in a fundraiser, trying to pay a lawyer but unsure what kind of lawyer you need to hire, feel free to reach out to me, and I can sort of help you discern what kind of legal support for which you should be fundraising or pursuing. Faith leaders also can play an invaluable role in emergency planning and family preparedness. It's obviously a difficult thing to talk about what to do when one of your loved ones is taken by ICE. And a lot of people don't want, understandably, to have the difficult conversation of what's going to happen to my kids if I'm abducted by ICE. So it's really important for faith leaders to have conversations that prepare people for this difficult eventuality, prepare for the worst, even as we are praying that the worst won't take place. And it's really important for emergency contact. And, often it's going to be documented in English speaking community members like clergy who will sort of end up having to spearhead this process. So it's important that you and whoever else the emergency contact is, maybe a documented family member, has access to people's A number and their country of origin. It's also worth considering filing or preparing what's called anticipatory habeas petition or next friend authorization, allowing other people in your community to make filings in courts in your behalf. Child custody and care instructions. What should happen to the kid if someone's taken by ICE? Maybe they should go over to grandma's house the next date over. Should they be pulled out of school? Should they stay in school? Should they go to a documented friend's place to minimize disruption? Should the pastor take care of the kid for like a couple of weeks as family members get ready to stand in? All really important and difficult conversations to have, but something that many of you are uniquely equipped to be able to navigate in terms of your pastoral skills and experience. Power of attorney designation, again, helpful for a family member or trusted, documented community member to have these kinds of information so that if money needs to be withdrawn or if healthcare needs to be taken care of, that can be done. And for those of you who are on your phone right now, I would really recommend looking up on the App Store or on the Google Play, Ready Now. It's an app by Human Rights First that allows folks to be able to preload their phone with all of their emergency contact that they would like contacted in the event of ICE detention, preload all of these instructions that we just discovered, and if, like, let's say you encounter ICE at a traffic stop, you can just press one button and it'll alert everyone who needs to know about what's happening with these instructions as well as emergency planning documents. In terms of legislation that we're supporting and advocating for, the big one right now is S4814. And this is currently before the United States Senate. A substantially similar bill already passed the House of Representatives with a few Republican defections who, really were specifically advocating for longstanding Haitian community members in their area. And our focus right now is to get the Senate to do the same, and the senators who have not signed up for this law to do the same. What this law would do if it were passed is it would extend, or it would instruct the Department of Homeland Security to extend Haitian temporary protected status by at least 3 years. And so getting this law passed would really be a huge help. And I think a lot of clergy often underestimate the kind of political clout that they can have, especially with their elected representatives. So many elected leaders get sworn into office, and especially when their political party primaries on very thin margins with very low turnout primary elections where only 5% of the community votes. So neighborhood and place-based organizations like churches often play a really disproportionate role in mobilizing voters, and a lot of senators and their staffers really will listen if you frame a message like this, that, I'm a pastor, or priest, or a leader at this church in your state of 100 people, of 150 people. And I want to hear more about what you've been doing to keep our Haitian neighbors safe. And we're writing you to urge you to support S4814 to extend temporary protected status and to be able to ask for these meetings. And you'd often be surprised at how much of a difference these kinds of campaigns can make. And you can go to senate.gov/senators/senatorcontact.htm, and you can find what the contact information, either by phone, by email, or by postcard is, where you can send these kinds of messages. Maybe if you have a largely documented congregation, you can put up this slide on top of, your presentation or your sanctuary and sort of encourage your community members to file this as well. This is sort of what I had in terms of the PowerPoint. Dr. Phil also asked me to briefly address the question of what it means for faith communities to be sanctuaries and shelters for immigrants in this current environment. As many of you might know, the Trump administration in the January of 2025 rescinded a policy called Protected Areas and Sensitive Policies, or sensitive sites, which used to discourage immigration enforcement actions in or around churches, houses of worship, hospitals, domestic violence shelters, soup kitchens, and food pantries, clothing drives, other places delivering crucial religious and social services. So it's now theoretically possible that ICE will arrest people at or around houses of worship. So far, this has been fortunately rare, even though the incidents have been alarming. Mostly what we've seen is raids in or around Hispanic, Spanish-speaking churches that are running food ministries. So food pantries and soup kitchens. And you can see why these would often be sort of an opportune enforcement bottleneck for ICE, because they often have long lines of visibly non-white, non-English speaking folks like winding around the congregation or their building. And so it would be really important for a lot of faith leaders to think about what it means to avoid creating these very opportune or visible enforcement bottlenecks that could be appealing as a site of an ICE arrest. And for outdoor lines, maybe this could look like moving waiting areas or lines indoors, or to be able to stagger service delivery hours so that not so many people are congregated at the same time. In terms of the insides of buildings or property, it's good to remember that churches are private property, and private property owners in the United States have, one, a Fourth Amendment right to prevent unwarranted or warrantless arrest or entry into private property by ICE, and ICE almost always never has an actual judicial warrant to enter into private property. And the Fifth Amendment right to be able to remain silent in the face of law enforcement questions. So if an ICE agent shows up your congregation or your food pantry door, you can refuse to open the door unless they present a judicial warrant, and you can refuse to answer any questions they ask you about about perhaps an immigrant who is inside or whom you're serving. One distinct challenges that faith communities face is that law enforcement can enter into spaces that are otherwise open to the public. And this is why you can see police officers hanging out in department stores or in malls or like other places that are technically private property, but in which the public has a license or an implied license to enter. So, if you're like at a restaurant that doesn't have the sign, please wait for host, you kind of might feel free to take a seat at the deli or to be able to sit at the bar. If a space is implicitly open for members of the public at large, law enforcement also doesn't need a warrant to enter. So I would really recommend, to the extent that you have indoor locations within your congregation that is otherwise open to the public, where you're routinely gathering a large number of undocumented people, maybe an English classroom, maybe shelter beds, maybe a cafeteria for a soup kitchen, to be able to put up signs that say things like staff or members only or invited guests only, that clearly signal to law enforcement that they would need a warrant to enter those spaces. A lot of people are worried these days about liability for harboring undocumented people or obstruction of justice. You know, we've seen some pastors get arrested after they're sort of body blocking an ICE agent as they're trying to arrest one of their congregants or a community member. These kinds of liabilities or prohibitions are possible when you are directly attempting to obstruct immigration enforcement actions or when you are trying to conceal someone actively from immigration enforcement. So let's say you tell an ICE agent a lie and say like, oh, they ran that way when they really ran the other way. Or if you drive someone across state lines to, after a final removal order or deportation order has been received, entered against them to help them hide from law enforcement, that can all be considered illegal harboring or obstruction. But it's important to remember these prohibitions are a lower law than the Constitution of the United States, which among other things guarantee your First Amendment right to expression and assembly, Fourth Amendment right to refuse warrantless entry, and Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So as like a practical example, if an ICE agent is knocking on the door to your building, totally legal for you to go and exercise your First Amendment right to like shout things like ICE is not welcome here. I'd only recommend doing this if you yourself are documented, but you know, that's within your right. But or to be able to film them and like live stream them to show everyone what is happening. Again, all First Amendment protected activity. It's also totally legal, even if you have undocumented people in the basement or in the shelter or in the soup kitchen, to refuse to enter the door and open the door unless they come with a warrant allowing them to enter. And also totally a matter of constitutional right for you to refuse to answer any kind of questions. Where it does become potentially illegal harboring is if you obstruct law enforcement in a way that is not a protected constitutional right. So even though it's constitutional right for you to stay silent, if you lie to them and say such and such person is not here, or if you misdirect them, maybe if you try to usher people out the basement or to the back door, that can all be potential obstruction and harboring, even though it is not the case if you are merely exercising your constitutional rights. To the extent that folks are interested, you know, we can think about maybe in August or September, a separate set of trainings on how your house of worship can be a sanctuary for immigrants, especially in light of Haitian TPS expiration. But I think that can wait for another day. And with that, that concludes the merits of my presentation. And even though it can be, I think, difficult as a lawyer these days to talk about all these constitutional rights, even in an era in which our government is trampling on so many constitutional rights. It's so encouraging to be able to be surrounded by so many courageous faith leaders who are doing such vital work especially because constitutional rights are being trampled on. It's not just up to lawyers or pastors, but to all of us as communities, as people of faith, to know not only what our rights are, to exercise wisdom or prudence about exercising these rights, but the courage of our conviction to stand up for our neighbors who are made in the image of God, to be able to be a source of safe haven, of sanctuary, and sources of love and support for all people. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Attorney Eugene. I thought this was very, very helpful, very thorough, very, very informative. Thank you so much. I want to open up now the floor for questions. What I would like to ask you to raise your hand so that we're not all speaking at the same time, and limit your question to the question. So don't give a whole prelude leading to the question. Just get straight to the question so we can get as many as possible. That would help us maximize the time. Ms. Jeanne Pizzi, you're the first. Go up and go.
Hi.
You're on.
Thank you, Dr. Phil, for putting this together. I have someone here with me who has a question.
Oh, all right. Let me go straight to the point. It happens sometimes they attack U.S. citizen by mistake or for whatever reason. What advice can they give U.S. citizen who may be targeted for whatever the reason?
Yeah, the writ of habeas corpus that we just discussed is actually the main way in which people who are US citizens who are targeted by ICE can seek relief. they can immediately get released from ICE detention, for instance, if they file a writ of habeas corpus and turns out they're an American citizen. If they are brutalized by ICE, then they should talk to a local civil rights lawyer who can help pursue a legal case against the ICE officer. In terms of just being with people as these attacks are taking place, try to document everything, film and live stream things if you are able.
Thank
Great
you very
question.
much.
All right, Mac, Elder Mac. I think that's Elder Mac from our church. Mac, you raised your hand, Elder Mac, I think. All right. Next, any other questions? Raise your hand because we wanted to get as many questions as possible for Attorney Eugene. So feel free to ask your questions. And
Yes,
there
I
are
have.
any?
There's
Go ahead.
another question, please.
Go ahead.
My next question now: if someone under TPS has already invested in purchasing property, a house, or some investment, what are the options for that person now? Are they going to seize his or her property, or is there any legal um, action, or what are the possibilities for that person not to lose his or her investment?
Yeah, undocumented people can own property in the United States, so seizure is not that much of a concern, but obviously owning property can be a risk, especially if you're at the risk of ICE detention or deportation, especially if it's going to tie you down to a single address where it'll become easier for ICE to find you and maybe execute a search or an arrest warrant. So best not to buy property if they have an option at this point. And if they did end up already purchasing the property, I'd really recommend designating a power of attorney for someone to be able to like sell that property and liquidate it and like deposit it in their like hopefully internationally accessible bank account.
Oh, can they do a quick claim deed and give and turn the property over to someone else, Attorney Eugene? That's
They can.
illegal? Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're gonna go back to Mac and then we'll go with Fabian. Mac, you're back on. Elder Mac? Okay, Fabian?
Evening, everyone. I thank you, Dr. Phil, for putting this together, and Attorney Eugene. A lot of us who are actually U.S. citizens, we do know someone of some sort that are TPS holders. My question is, how can we become a type of resource for them? Because I was paying attention earlier to a post that was made by, I believe, the director of U.S. DHS, and they were saying that most people who are on TPS, they will be able to locate them due to the fact that their locations and addresses are shared. So if we know someone or a family member or friend, how can we be a resource or a support system to them as far as lodging or anything else, just to help in the process of this situation? How risky can that be for the person who's willing to provide that type of accommodation or that type of protection to a friend or a loved one?
Yeah. It is fully legal and within your constitutional rights to offer assistance and support to all persons, regardless of their immigration status, including by providing shelter, food, housing, education, or help accessing the legal system. And as I mentioned, it's going to be fully within your constitutional right if ICE ever comes to your door where you're helping shelter people to refuse to answer the door or to be able to refuse entry unless like they have a warrant. It's obviously not a zero risk proposition because ICE agents can be violent, and even if they're supposed to respect your constitutional right, they often won't. All I can say is that legally speaking, you are within your right, and I think it's a good flag to remember that because a lot of TPS holders have been in the same address that's registered with the government for so long, it's also worth considering changing to a different address if that is possible.
Absolutely. And I just have one last thing. It's not really much of a question. Is there any possibility you can share the app again if someone?
It's in the chat. It's in the chat. Look in the chat. We'll post it in the chat.
Thank you so much. I think that's
Let's go to Dr. Jeriel, and then we'll take Mac again. Mac, we're going back to you for the third time. I think, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phil, for putting this together for us, and thank you, Mr. Nam, for all your information. So my question is, beyond hosting legal clinics, what systems would you suggest that churches could start to establish now so that we're not, necessarily improvising during a detention or workplace interruption or, separation of families or even with, sudden policy changes, et cetera, moving forward, given that we're in limbo, what would you suggest would be some strong infrastructure that we could establish? Please, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would say not just like responsive legal clinics, but like family preparedness and emergency planning workshops are really helpful to kind of do all of the conversations that we just covered in terms of emergency habeas petitions, in terms of power of attorney, healthcare directives, childcare instructions and whatnot. And I think it would be especially powerful for faith communities that do have the resources to open like shelters to be able to house people in the event that they really need that kind of work really badly. Work authorization issue, as I discussed, like there's like a really big opportunity for I think faith communities to be center place for non-employment gigs. So if you have a church bulletin board or a newsletter, for instance, and let's say anytime someone needs a short-term babysitter or a construction or garden job done, it can be really helpful for faith communities to gather that kind of postings in a way that makes sure that those opportunities go to people without work authorization who can best benefit from that kind of opportunity for paid work.
Okay, good. Let's go to Mac again, and then we'll take Stanley, and then
Good
Rich.
afternoon. Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Fantastic. Sorry for the technical issues I'm having. Thank you, Dr. Phil and Eugene. Great information. Thank you for taking the time to share that with us. So my question is, you mentioned earlier with the I-9 requirements upon employment for employers, are there any action that needs to be taken now? Should they go back and audit I-9 information, should just wait and see what happened? Do you have any advice for employers who currently have TPS employees? And is there anything that they need to do at this time?
Yeah. As someone who primarily represents immigrants and asylum seekers in court, I do have a bit of a conflict of interest because, like, I never want any employer to ever look at their I-9 to check if their employee status has expired. That's not obviously, I mean, because the safest thing legally for employers is to use E-Verify. I just think that it doesn't really, I think it's unnecessary because liability for employers only really attached when there are multiple knowing egregious violations, and no one has ever been dinged, as far as as I understand, for merely failing to keep track of the fact that someone's I-9 has expired. Most employers will only collect them, years in advance and then like never check again. And I think that is totally fine. And so, to the extent that you want to be an immigrant-friendly workplace, I would recommend just collecting the initial I-9 and the work authorization, making sure that everything is correct at the point of employment or initial hiring, and then just keeping it in a drawer and just having them ready and well documented, but without sort of proactively auditing it.
Thank you so much.
Stanley.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Phil, and thank you, Attorney Eugene. My question is in regards to someone who's they already married, they are in the process of getting their paper, but it's they're still waiting. So what should they do in that situation if they get in trouble with ICE? So how can they find some help in that capacity?
Yeah, make sure that they're keeping all of the receipts for what's called a notice of action I-797C that they should have received when they got their either I-130 petition for alien relative or I-4085 application for the adjustment of status. what they can and should do is to keep a copy of it that had been like accepted initially by USCIS. And what you can actually do if you're placed in a immigration court removal proceeding is to directly apply for the immigration judge to give you that adjustment of status, which is a full defense to removability. So just to be able to make sure that you can submit that application directly to the immigration judge as quickly as possible in the event that they're taken by ICE and placed in removal proceedings.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
All right, Richard and then G. Then we have some questions in the chat.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Dr. Phil, for putting this together. My question is, if an undocumented person wanted to get married to a U.S. citizen, would that be possible in today's times?
Yes, it is possible. There's going to be more scrutiny than there previously had been on what's called the good faith authenticity of the marriage, as well as some risk at the interview phase of like being abducted by ICE. But it is still very much something that people should consider and pursue if they have the opportunity to.
Right. All right, G. You had your hand raised.
My hand was raised because Mac's mic was not functioning.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There's a question. Can someone still work in their place of employment if their place of employment hasn't notified them of their work authorization is expired? So if they haven't told you your thing is expired, can you still work? That's the question someone asked in the chat.
It's complicated. So there's no statute or sort of a congressionally passed law against it, but there is what's called an administrative regulation that considers this to be a civil violation. And there's technically no penalty for it, except they can ask you about it in your green card application and consider it to be a disqualifying factor. But they can only consider it to be a disqualifying factor insofar as your green card application isn't based on your relationship with direct U.S. citizen family member, like parent, child, spouse, or if you are not an asylum applicant. So it's like a very fact-specific question that people should probably talk with their lawyer. But in my experience, basically every Haitian former TPS holder who have been able to like adjust for a green card were entitled to an exemption from this regulatory issue, even if they had worked for months or years after employment document expiration.
Yeah. That's a great question. I have a quick question. I want to get it in before our time expire. Can you go over the thing about churches protecting congregations, protecting people in the church? Is the church allowed to do that? I know some churches in Broward are learning about protecting the congregations in the church. So like a harbor, what do you call the term? The harboring?
Harboring, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what the church has a legal right to do is provide shelter, to refuse warrantless entry to law enforcement, so refuse to enter the door unless they present a valid judicial warrant, and to not answer any questions if ICE ever asks or law enforcement ever asks a question about like what's going on behind the door. What it doesn't have a right to do is to engage in harboring or obstruction, which would look like lying to the ICE agent when they come and say, this person is not living here, or to be able to like otherwise sort of like with the specific intent of helping them hide from ICE, like hide them away. Let's say you give them like a plan to, someone gets a removal order and you like hide them in your basement and say like this is the back door. That kind of planning that is specifically designed to affirmatively help conceal someone from immigration enforcement detection, and it's not a constitutional right, is where harboring would start.
Good. Mr. German, did you already ask your question, Mr. German? Okay, I think you already did. Two last questions. Someone asked a question: should parents start planning for travel documents for their children born in the U.S., like U.S. passport, in case of removal procedures to return home with their children?
Yes, absolutely. I think applying for a passport for the kids can be very helpful. And I'm actually not 100% sure about what the passport control policies in Haiti are, like to the extent that if a Haitian child of Haitian parents is like on a flight with their parents, if the child would require a passport, but that is something worth looking into and considering, and there's really no reason to not get a passport for your child. And it is very much a part of the family planning, family preparedness and emergency planning conversations you should have. Whether, for instance, if the parents get deported, whether the kids should try to go to another US citizen family member, or maybe like a member of the church, or whether they should prioritize staying united with their family even outside the United States.
Okay, good. We have time for two more questions. I think Dr. JL has another. Your hand is up as well, and then time for two more questions, and we'll wrap up.
Thank you. My next question is, what warning signs should our community know when choosing, an immigration attorney or a preparer, especially now that a lot of people are afraid to make certain decisions, or they're very vulnerable to fraud. There's all kinds of information being propagated all over social media, etc., emails, scams, and sorts. So what would you say are some really strong warning signs to pay attention to?
Yeah, the first thing that people should do is to be able to look up the attorney, one, on the website of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. This isn't like fully dispositive because not everyone's registered. I'm not a member myself, but like if someone is on that list, they're relatively very trustworthy compared to the universe of scammers that are out there. The other thing to do is to look up the attorney name in your state's bar association webpage. Every state lawyers association is going to have a lawyer's information just to confirm that they are in fact licensed to practice law, as well as doesn't have any disciplinary records, which is often a big flag.
Good. There's a question in the chat. If a lawful permanent resident green card holder has already filed an I-130 petition for their unmarried daughter, TPS holder, over the age of 21, but that daughter plans to marry a U.S. citizen later this year, what happens to the pending petition?
The pending petition stays, but because the U.S. citizen spouse petition is going to get through much quicker, the U.S. citizen spouse should still file an additional I-130 for their newly married former TPS holding spouse either way.
Okay. All right. And one more question. If someone had TPS and applied for 1129 petition for religious worker and receive a receipt, where do they stand currently?
It depends on whether the receipt is an approval of status or if it was merely a receipt of the application. It's possible that the receipt or the I-797C just grants you what's called an I-94 for authorized stay, in which case they're now, they've maintained their documentation. If not, they're in a bit of a limbo where it's possible that the application will just be accepted later and then it'll sort of be retroactively, this unauthorized period of stay will be retroactively covered up, but it's also possible that the application gets rejected, in which case the whole period of stay would have been undocumented.
Thank you so much. We have one last question. It's an iPhone user, and then we have to respect the time because I wanted to keep this to an hour, but now we're hour and 15 minutes, which is good. That shows that there's an interest in the information. iPhone user, if you can ask your questions, and then we'll wrap up with some closing thoughts. There's a lot of iPhones, so whoever put their hand up, going once, going twice, you've been Android. Listen, I want to say thank you to Attorney Eugene for taking the time to put this on for us. I hope you all found this useful. We tried to answer all the questions that were in the chat. If anybody would like to have the presentation, I will get that from Attorney Eugene and then we can share it with you. We are also discussing possibly having him come to Fort Myers in person to hold something with our congregation. So we'll let you know that if that happens. But I do you want to give them your information in case they want to get in touch with you? You want to put that in the chat, Attorney Eugene, in case someone needs to contact you or no?
Yes, I will put the intake information email here.
Okay. If you guys can look at the chat, it's there. It's info@interfaithcenter.org.
And I'm also
And
just going to plug in the Google Slides here as well.
okay, awesome. All right, great. So thank you so much. Elder Mac, if you're still on, do you mind closing out in a word of prayer? I do want to thank Attorney Eugene again. Thank you, everyone. This was on short notice, but this was very well attended. We put the word out on Tuesday, and today's Thursday, so I can only imagine if we had a week to promote this, it would have been. But I'm very, very encouraged by the amount of people that showed interest in this, and stay tuned to our social media pages. We'll share information as they come because we want to be at the forefront of this. I want to let you guys know that the church is not just praying, but we're working behind the scenes, advocating, dealing with, connecting with people like Attorney Eugene and other people who are helping. So I want the faith community to know that in addition to praying, we are applying work to our faith. So when you hear people say the church is not doing anything, that's not true. We are doing stuff like this. Give people information, calm the fear, remove the misinformation. So let people know that no, the church is doing more than just praying, that we are actively advocating on behalf of our community. And we know that God reigns and he's going to win in the end. So we're not going to let fear rule us. We're going to stay in faith and trust the Lord, right? Because the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord and he turns it like the waters. So with that being said, Elder Mac, if you're still on, would you mind closing out a word of prayer? If you're
Yes,
still on. Yes.
let's pray. Oh, gracious Father and God, we thank you for this day, for this is the day that you have made, and we rejoice in it. We thank you, Father, for allowing us to be informed of the situation that's facing so many people. You said in your word that to do justice is one of the things that you require of us, and to show favor to the immigrants and those that are persecuted. So, Father, we thank you for the information that Eugene shared tonight. I pray that we will take it to heart and apply it in situations where it's applicable. I pray that you bless him and bless the work that he continues to do on behalf of those that are being mistreated or not allowed the very rights that they deserve. Thank you for everyone that's on the call. I pray, God, that you'll just continue to strengthen our hearts and continue to keep us in the center of your will. Bless Dr. Phil and Dr. Phil Ministries as he continues to do the work that you've called him to do. And I pray, God, that you just allow us to be diligent in our actions, not just praying, but taking steps, the necessary steps to protect ourselves and our families, our businesses, our employees, and help us to be good neighbors to each other, to look out for each other. We thank you for all that's said tonight, and we pray that you'll give us a restful night's sleep. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, thank you, everyone. Stay tuned. Share this information with your friends and family. Now you've been informed. You're empowered now to make good decisions, to give good information. So, Attorney Eugene, thank you once again from the bottom of our hearts, and we pray blessings on you and the work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure and it was so wonderful to connect with all of you. God bless you all.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Thank you for being on, and go ahead and share this information with your friends and family, and post it on social media. Let them know that it was a great session and that the church is working. All right. So, Pastor Willie, anything you want to share? Before we leave, Attorney, any update on the bill? Any? I know it's moving through. I know you kind of talked about it briefly. Any update you can share in 60 seconds?
Yeah, the bill is still very much in negotiation among the senators. Currently, I think the focus is very much on making sure that uh, Senate Minority Leader Schumer, the Democratic lead, is able to whip the votes to be able to get all Democratic senators to sign in, as well as at least 13 Republican defections. So it's an uphill battle, but something that we're very much hoping to continue pushing for.
Okay, good. All right. Well, again, thank you everyone, and everybody have a good night, have a great weekend, and we'll jump back on here again if there's stuff we need to talk about. Pastor Will, anything you want to say before we leave? I know you're actively doing a lot of stuff in the Northeast, so anything you want to share, Dr. Mullery?
Sure. I just want to encourage everyone to call family and friends in other states to get the co-signers to sign the bill. We have 47 Democrats, 53 Republicans. We have about 20, a little over 20 something that signed it on the Democratic side. So we really got to keep the pedal to the metal. You know, call your friends in different states, family members in different states. Tell them to call their senators so that they can co-sign on the S 4814 bill. All right. God bless you all.
All right. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Message, culte d'adoration, études bibliques, concerts, réveil, toute activité spirituelle ça yo, en direct sur Radio Révélation Internationale. Radio Révélation Internationale, 24 heures sur 24, c'est Radio Parle. Radio Parle, c'est Radio Parle tout.